Right, Simon. I guess we can you give me about 15 more minutes of your time? Is that okay?
Yeah.
50, excellent. Because I really do want to ask you this about the idea of subjective. Why is Heidegger not a dogmatic subjectivist or an idealist? And I just for the viewer, I think this is a really important excerpt. You claim in this book on Heidegger's being in time in page 28. It's a bit of a mouthful, but you say, thus, perceptual experience is rendered intelligible through a process of ideation, generalized. I'll probably skip that part. I'll probably skip that part. And the important bit is, uh, you speak about the universal and particular, and then you say, the important thing here is that this move from the particular to the universal takes place at the level of intuition. It is not something seen in the object and not a subjective construction. Oops, I think we lost Simon there again. Excellent. So just the last bit that I wanted to read out from that excerpt was, you say here the categorical forms are not the subjective constructs of acts, but the objects that manifest themselves in those acts. That was such an important little excerpt from the book, Simon. So uh, I guess my
Well, that's
question.
from the Heidegger book, is it?
Yeah,
That's
that's
from.
correct. From your lecture introduction. Oh, sorry, from your lecture Heidegger for Beginners, which is about a 30-page lecture, and it's excellent. You speak about the a priori phenomenology. It's so good. But simply the question is, yeah, why is Heidegger not a dogmatic subjectivist or an idealist? What differentiates him from more of like a Berkeleyan idealist?
Oh, well, he's not a Berkeley idealist because he doesn't believe that um, you know things are things are just perceptions which are in the head. So he's not an empirical idealist, right? So that's easy. He's not a dogmatic anything. He's taking the critical turn of Kant. You can see Heidegger's approach to say something like reality in paragraph 43 of Being and Time as, I think of it as an existential deepening of transcendental idealism. So transcendental idealism in Kant is the idea that we live in an empirically real world, right? There's a real world full of real stuff. That's indisputable, and that wasn't the case for Berkeley. But that world is a world which is a world which we give order to, we give shape to, and that's what Kant thinks the categories of the understanding are what give shape and order to that empirically real world. So Kant's claim is that an empirical realist is also a transcendental idealist, that the world is indeed a really real world, but it's a world which is shaped and ordered by human activity, or it's observer dependent, you could say. And I see that as that's true. What that Kant's problem is that Kant operates for Heidegger at the level of what he calls the present at hand, so that Kant Kant's Kant's philosophy for Heidegger is the right intuition with the wrong ontology. Heidegger thinks that the present at hand, by which he means the seeing the world with philosopher's spectacles, seeing the world in intellectualist terms, theoreticist terms, seeing the world and then asking questions like, well, how do I know that you've got a mind, or you're a robot, or how do you know that I am who I say I am, and so on and so forth. All of these questions arise with the wrong ontology, the ontology of the present at hand. So what Heidegger tries to do in Being and Time is to give us another ontology, which is an ontology of the ready to hand, of the handiness, of the availability of the world. And this is where Dreyfus is right. This is a kind of pragmatist approach. And Heidegger's pragmatism, in quotation marks, it's both realist and idealist, right? It's both committed to the idea that there's a really real world, and that really real world is something which is shaped and apprehended by the observers that understand that world. And so, and if there's a philosopher that I think is most similar to Heidegger certainly in the American tradition, it would be William James. And James develops in his late work, his unfinished work, this idea of what he calls radical empiricism. And I see Heidegger as being pretty consistent with that. And that's an attempt. How do you? And so Heidegger's question. This is also what's wrong with philosophy. What's wrong with philosophy is that philosophy reduces the flux of experience to concepts, to these static, abstract concepts like thinking substance or monad or whatever it might be. Heidegger is concerned with two things. He's concerned with movement, that whatever's going on is in movement. Everything is moving all the time. We live in a world of movement, and movement is time, and time is movement, and all of that. And how do we express movement? How do we say movement? Because if we say movement, we fix it. We reduce it to a kind of still point. How do we express movement as movement? Very hard thing to do, and something of which philosophy is quite bad at doing, with the exception of Heidegger. And I think Hegel's dialectic is a way of thinking about movement too. And the second thing it's about is meaning, right? That the world is meaningful for Heidegger. And that meaning is not in the head, that meaning is out there in the world. It's a meaning that we apprehend. The world just hangs together and is significant. That's just a fact. Then how do we describe that is the question, which he sets himself. So he's not. So that's how I understand Heidegger's position. And then in division 2 of Being in Time, he takes all of that and just kind of spins it into another dimension, which is even more exciting. And does that help?
Absolutely, it does. In fact, just the last question on Heidegger, Simon, just because of time constraints. It's so why is it, again, a very naive question, but for a person who's a neophyte, why is it that Heidegger uses the category of a Dasein and introduces a Dasein instead of a cogito or a subject? What's unique about Dasein for Heidegger?
Heidegger's trying to invent a new language because he thinks that the language of the tradition is a language that blinds us because we think we understand what it means. So if I say I'm a mind, or I'm a person, or I'm a spirit, body, or I'm a brain, or whatever, we think we know what those things mean. And Heidegger's view is that tradition has to be destroyed. That's his saying, it has to be destroyed. So he is committed in the larger project of which Being in Time is a part to basically the destruction of the history of philosophy. He thinks that modern philosophy in particular, and the criminal really is always Descartes for him. Descartes has reduced the world to a world of subjective experiences, of a reality which is understood as substance. And that is the wrong ontology for thinking about being in the world for him. So he uses the term Dasein. It's a term you can find in German. It's a perfectly ordinary term. It just means existence. And he uses that to designate us. And then the question is, well, is Dasein the human being? Well, yeah, we're Dasein, but then could there be Dasein beyond the human? And that's a question which, there's a lot of debate and interpretation about that. I think you could think about animal Dasein. There's a philosopher called John Hoagland who talks about you can have a Dasein of a city, Dasein of a whole place. So there could be a way you can get from Heidegger into. So Heidegger wants a name for who we are that is not just subjective, right? Because if we say subject, we think we understand. So Heidegger's strategy is to defamiliarize us with what we think we know, and to actually get us to start thinking. And for that, he thought we needed a new vocabulary. And the first item in that vocabulary is the idea of Dasein. So if you translate it as person, then you think, oh, well, I know what a person is, but then you miss the point. You've got to go with the kind of thought experiment that Heidegger is trying to get us to.
Yeah.
To Dasein is us, but as something really quite strange. I think he describes Dasein as the happening of strangeness, and I quite like that.
And I think it's probably why when reading Heidegger, as you described, there is some sort of conversion experience once you start getting into the world of Heidegger.